From the Sky News Centre, this is Paul Murray Live.
Thank you, Sherry. G'day. Happy Tuesday. I've got a lot, and I'm not in a great mood about some of the news that's around today. As always, I say, make sure that you pay attention to what they do, not what they say. And what they have been doing has not been good. Now, we know that the Prime Minister, fresh out of the Dunkley by-election, keeps trying to tell anyone who'll listen that, of course, he gets everything about cost of living.
I've already foreshadowed that we'll have more measures in the budget. We work each and every day to do more. That's the focus of the government.
That was Saturday, was the election. Sunday's when he said that. And now, on Tuesday, up goes private health insurance. Seriously, they think you are so stupid that you won't notice what is happening in your own life. They think you are so disinterested in the decisions of government that you won't notice this was their decision. They think you know so little about your own finances that this decision basically wipes out half of the tax cut for everyone that supposedly is the central idea about dealing with cost of living. That's why I'm on fire tonight and so, frankly, annoyed. I'm trying not to use the other language that's in my head. And then there's just the let them eat cake attitude from supposedly the Workers' Party, the people who care about the middle class. When petrol, a couple of years ago, was $1.79, the then opposition leader, now Prime Minister, said that all of it was an example about a Prime Minister that was out of touch. And obviously this was, an evil thing about Scott Morrison, blah, rah, rah. Well, tonight, petrol in Sydney is $2.32 a litre for average unleaded. It's exactly the same in Brisbane and it is in Melbourne as well, at $2.31. Anthony Albanese was crying the house down at $1.79. $1.79. There's not a person who doesn't drive around who wouldn't, be more than happy for it to go back there, even for just a couple of days a week. Yet, the Prime Minister, who's doing everything on cost of living, when they're briefing out to the media what they may or may not be doing in the federal budget, what are they going to do about the 49 cents a litre tax that they have on petrol? Well, nothing, of course.
But the ministers have ruled out cutting petrol taxes again.
Instead, they say that the tax cut that has basically now been wiped out by the decision made today by the federal government on private health premiums, again, they think you are just so mesmerised by the amazing politics that is played by the Prime Minister, that our new, better, shinier form of politics is so dazzling that you'll forget your own circumstances. Now, I, like you, I'm from the middle class, from suburban Australia, live in suburban Australia, love family members that are the same in suburban Australia. And they're not left and they're not right and they're not Team Blue and they're not Team Red. They're just normal people who get off their backside, work as hard as they possibly can, try to be as decent as they possibly can be with their families, including whether their kids are 6, 26 or 46. People are just trying to hold on. But the arrogance of the Prime Minister, the Canberra media who report on him all day, every day, who for years and years and years pretended that cost of living was something to lead the news bulletin every single night when they could make it personal about the last guy, but it's all cyclical about this guy. And again, to give you an idea, to give you an insight about priorities, Albo and Chalmers are going to spend $40 million on taxpayer-funded ads to tell you about a tax cut that, thanks to their decision on private health insurance, has now already been 50% taken away. Now, of course, I'm not entirely sure what public education campaign you need for people who will be getting something without having to fill out a form. They don't have to do anything to get it. It's not like somebody who is being told to double check with your doctor to prevent this disease, or don't forget to fill out this form to get this rebate. It's just overt political advertising. Overt political advertising where I guarantee you the ads will look exactly the same. as the social media posts of Labor MPs in the past few months. This stuff annoys me because I always thought the people who played federal politics were a step above some of the people involved in state politics. But it seems the lessons that have been learnt in Canberra right now are the ones that are being learnt and have been learnt through the Andrews government, where anyone who disagrees with you is a spiv, is useless, is unnecessary, where the whole project of government is about making sure that you can get to about 60, 65% of permanent political majority, as long as you've got half the population determined to keep you in office because you'll keep the money coming their way. You'll keep hiring bureaucrats and fanning them out all over the state, so there's always just enough of a Labor vote everywhere to keep yourself in power. And if you're in business, you wouldn't dare say anything against the decisions of government because they're probably your biggest freaking client. Now, you can say this is amazing because it's a ruthless machine that is achieving its ends, which is to keep Team Red in power. But this stuff damages our politics and, by extension, our nation. The idea that unless you're in government, you are superfluous. Talk to anyone in Victoria who got railroaded by Andrews. And that's the sort of stuff that's starting to happen now. The people who supposedly care about you. But the reality is that 2 days into the week after a by-election, they're upping your private health insurance, something which every citizen who earns over $50,000, basically all working people, have to have, or they get penalised by paying even extra taxes when it comes to Medicare. $40 million they've got for that. But again, another example about the people who are just forgotten. And they're forgotten by the media, and they're forgotten by politics, and they're forgotten, frankly, by many, if not most of the voters at times. It's the people that you and I could be in a week, a month, or a year's time. That's just the reality of life. If it all starts to go the wrong way, you could end up in a scenario where you could be one of the many in this country who literally go to charities to find food. Now, again, how will they push this away in the Prime Minister's office? How will they roll their eyes collectively in the Canberra Press Gallery? Oh, there he is, that bloke on Sky News banging on about some sort of dystopian Australia. Well, wake the heck up. Because again, there is no birthright that means because you're not in those queues, you did something right, and if you are in those queues, they did something wrong. If you lose your job tomorrow, how long would it take before you run out of cash? If you got divorced next year, what would happen financially? We all know. It's part of the anxiety when you grew up in a house like that, or you've seen your parents before go something through the depression. It's only people who know that they've got a job for life because you can't possibly get sacked in the public service that carry on the way this mob do. And look at their service. I mean, literally, the Prime Minister to say, I've worked in the private sector, has to go back to when he was a bank teller in the 80s. In the meantime, he was behind the scenes advisor to a whole bunch of lefty politicians, then he becomes one himself, haranguing against the Howard government in the 1990s. Literally, only two people in the entire federal government, in the cabinet, that are sitting around making their decisions all day, every day, have any experience in small business. One of them is Tony Burke, who just tells us that he was, but we have no sign of what small business he was involved in. And the other one is the Trade Minister, and his small business was a winery in between times in the Senate. They don't get it. They don't care because they know if we can pour the sugar in the ear of the media, give them the access that the evil Liberals didn't, send them to sleep with nice little messages and cute little exclusives, that they will not call us out for the society that is being built, let alone the failures in their political promises. Well, I want to report here, I want to show you the reporting rather, that again goes back to the heart of the issue that I find disgraceful in a country like ours. That last year, as you know, 3.7 million people weren't able to put food on the table. They ended up having to reach out to charities. But of course, before they reach out to charities, they go without. And even after they go without, they might eventually start reaching out to family. Hundreds of Australians say they skip meals and visit food banks and even dumpster dive as the cost of living crisis continues. Oh, no, but you're $14 a week tax cut. That's all you get. $40 million is for us to tell you about how amazing it is. According to the story, a mother skips meals to make sure that her son can eat dinner. Others get through the day on little more than a coffee or a bread roll, going hungry to pay the rent, electricity bills, or buy their pets food. A few examples of fellow Australians. This government doesn't give a stuff. Most of the media doesn't either. Cost of living is just one of those things that they could use as a fulcrum to get rid of the government they didn't like because they weren't giving them the access that they preferred. They weren't getting the exclusives. So cost of living, which was, of course, such a massive issue and still remains such a massive issue, and I, as a kid like you of suburban Australia, am absolutely compelled to talk about it and to keep talking about it because these people need a voice. Thank you to the ABC for actually reporting on this today. Real Australian. I go without food to ensure my son has something to eat. I've also gone to a charity for the first time in my life. You have no idea how humiliating this was for me, and it almost cost my life. That's why I talk about it every night, because those are the stakes. The smart alecky of the Prime Minister, the arrogance of his office, and the attitudes generally of the media that are just turning into this nice little system that all feeds itself and protects itself and never calls anything out. Renee says that she limits her food intake so she can feed and look after her dog. Another person says they eat one meal at a moment because it's all they can afford. This government has $40 million to flog its own too little too late tax cut because of the political implications. How much money extra have they given out to groups like Food Bank who take care of people like this? Not even half. Not even half. In fact, according to Amanda Rishworth, who was the relevant minister here, they announced an extra $14.4 million. People are going to charities right now and they are so humiliated by it, it may well cost their life. And these lowlifes, I'm sorry, I shouldn't talk about my fellow citizen like this, but these people in power do not care. They truly do not care. They assume you are so stupid and you hate the last mob so much that you'll vote for them forever. They assume if they say the word cut, cut, cut and they put up a picture of Peter Dutton in black and white, ooga booga and scare, you'll just keep voting for them. But the priority of their own government is that when their own citizens are queuing for food, that they spend twice as much on themselves politically than they do on extra funding for food banks. It's a disgusting set of values and about priorities about this government. And how often did that bloke constantly tell us about from whence he came? Now, you would imagine that if you've come from those circumstances, you actually do something. That you have some capacity to be able to do something more than any politician in the past, who, yes, all say they care about this stuff, but they sort of it all falls by the wayside. Who understand that it's a nice way to get to people's hearts and show that you care, but in the end, let's move money somewhere else. This bloke is spending twice as much, flogging his own too little, too late tax cuts for political reasons than he is on extra money for food services. Honestly, this bloke, fair dinkum. And another example of priorities. Now, I get it. There's a lot of need for things in and around the federal budget. There's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to be dealt with. But at a time when apparently there's absolutely no more money in the federal budget to do things like cut petrol taxes so you are able to get around with your kids, with your husband, with your wife, to and from the shops, you name it, the reason you have a car. And again, To the little lefties inside the city that all don't understand why people have cars, I'll tell you why. Because it's freedom. Remember the first time as a kid that you ever got to ride a bike by yourself? And I don't just mean you're a little kid, but that first time you were able to sort of ride to the other end of the suburb. The freedom to move it this way and that way, and do I take this left turn or this right turn? Do I go up the hill, down the hill? Do I take that street? Where do I want to go? That's freedom. That's autonomy. And cars are that for people who live in suburban Australia, because there's not a bus every 5 minutes, and the bus doesn't go exactly where you want to go. And you've worked hard enough to be able to either pay with cash or you're paying off a loan to be able to have the car to keep moving around. So when the fuel that runs through the veins of that thing that gives you autonomy and freedom costs more and more and more, and the government that takes a rake off the top of 50 cents in every single litre, 50 cents, 50 cents, 50 cents, 50 cents. They just are in a position to do something, to make one thing better. No, because we're going to spend twice as much on ourselves to flog a tax cut that is too little too late for any one of the 10 million workers that they took $1,500 off last year. But another way, they just found money under the table. Prime Minister announced today amongst the ASEAN leaders $2 billion in Australian taxpayers' money, which will now go into a green energy investment fund. Fair dinkum. Literally, the lady who's right on the line, so embarrassed, so broken by having to go to a freaking charity. The charity gets 14 million. The government spends 40 million on itself. The government may well be in yet another surplus, but they can't possibly spare a dime when it comes to petrol taxes. And they have the gall, the balls, to pretend that they give us stuff. You see, their view about the citizen is we're all just two things to them: taxpayers and voters. That's it. And you're a good little citizen if you pay your taxes and if you vote the way they want you to vote. And if you don't vote the way that they want you to vote, guess what? They don't care. Take example about what's happening right now with the energy rollout across regional Australia. None of that would be acceptable in a Labor electorate in the city. None of that would be acceptable in one of the Teal electorates. None of that would be acceptable in any of the Green electorates. But where's it all being dumped? Oh, that's right, in the places that don't vote for them. Because according to these people, you don't matter. The Daniel Andrews effect on the modern generation of politician is a disgrace. And I've got another example of it here. Barry O'Farrell was the New South Wales Premier for a hot minute. Thankfully, he was able to replace Christina Keneally. And as you remember, now I think that he was a good start. He was part of multiple governments that were obsessed with actually building things. But then conversations started to start around a bottle of wine, whether he remembered that it was or wasn't sent to him. Now, he said that he didn't remember that it was sent to him. Then a piece of paper was produced and said it was sent to him. So then straight away after giving that evidence, he walked right up to the microphones, and this is what happened because, in my view, he was an honourable man.
In no way did I seek to mislead, willfully or otherwise, the Independent Commission Against Corruption. That would go against everything that I have. But this has clearly been a significant memory fail on my part, albeit within weeks of coming to office, but I accept the consequences of my actions.
Now, that's a decent bloke. That's a guy who turns around and says, OK, let's say best case scenario, I literally forgot, I went in, they proved the evidence, I was wrong, sorry, people have got to be able to trust the person who leads the state, I'm out. I didn't knowingly mislead. Well, let's compare that with Stephen Miles. Now, you've heard this story by now. Stephen Miles should have resigned as the Premier of Queensland today if he was serious about integrity. But he's part of a new generation that, again, are informed by the sort of crash or crash-through politics, again, of the Daniel Andrewses of this world. These people are beyond shameless. These people are beyond responsibility, beyond accountability. Now, in the same way that the left used to worry and whinge all the time about how Donald Trump was post-truth, this bloke, these people are beyond shame. as long as they're always able to make a pivot 3 months before insert election, then that's all that matters, because your job as a citizen is to pay tax or vote the right way. And if you don't do enough of either of those things, then you can go jump. When he was the Deputy Premier, being the great smart aleck that he is, he was giving advice to another member of the Labor Party while Parliament was sitting. That advice was to pull on some motion to change the subject, who cares? But he was asked about whether he had actually sent a message to a fellow Labor MP who dutifully did exactly what the message told them to do.
Can the Premier confirm he did not send an SMS to the member for Palmerston between 10 a.m. and 11:30?
Pretty straight, right? His answer?
I thank the member for Burleigh. I can.
Done. Story over. No. And then the story broke on Channel 9 News last night that should have resulted in Stephen Miles, after being caught, knowingly lying.
But this photo sent to 9 News by an MP shows a text message on the phone of member for Palmerston Ali King at 10:44 a.m. It appears to be sent from a Stephen, whose photo bears a striking likeness to Stephen Miles. It's what the MP claims is a smoking gun.
Now, instead of having a scenario where somebody stood up and told a bald-faced lie in the Parliament, the result of which was, regardless of whether I can get myself out of the mess, you've caught me, that's it, I'm done. What did he do today? There was a greater debate around the halls of Queensland Parliament about who took the photo, who sent the photo, as opposed to why did the Premier lie and why hasn't he been forced to resign as a result of lying? Instead, what Stephen Miles was able to do was to avoid being punished by the Parliament at the first possible opportunity to correct the record. He corrected the record. But before that, can I just ask our control room to bring back when he said no? His answer to the question, did you send the text between this time and that time, right? He knew what they were talking about, but he thought it'd never be seen. So what did he say originally?
I thank the member for Burleigh. I can.
Swat away. When he's caught red-handed, it's on Channel 9 News. Instead of resigning, how does he try to put it back in the horse? Like this.
Last night it was brought to my attention a photograph taken in the chamber while the Legislative Assembly was sitting. I wish to update the House and advise that I, as the member for Murrumba, did text the member for Palmerston during question time, which was the subject of the member's question. The text message was from some time prior and I did not recall it at the time. I therefore wish to correct the record and apologise to the House for the error.
Shake it off, move through. Now, I know, of course, that lots of people in and around the Labor Party would say, well, mate, we're close to election, we really want to push him on. Well, again, when Barry O'Farrell, whether he liked it or not, was caught red-handed on the wrong side of where reality was, he had to go. Stephen Miles, exactly the same thing. I know, but I'll slither my way through. Change the subject. Hope that they start talking about how ripped my physique is, like some garbage was on the weekend. Pretend that the Liberal Party's going to cut essential services in the lead up to the next election, despite the fact that his own government has so desperately underperformed this term, last term, the term before that, on health. But because there's enough public servants, the scare goes out, they hold on to this. You know the game. Don't vote for the Libs because the 2032 Olympics will disappear. Queensland is awesome. But, the same rubbish that they always serve up. But in the same way that financially, you can't have governments that have no restraint because you end up like Venezuela or Greece. You can't have politicians that are beyond shame or accountability, or you end up with people who start to do exactly what we learnt about in Victoria, where grey corruption starts to feed through the whole system. When political appointees are put everywhere, they all do the party political bidding, and the division between the government, that is, what is supposed to be independent, and the public service, well, all of that just becomes an extension of one party of government, and that ain't good. It wasn't good when it's Sir Joe, and it's not good when it's this mob. Now, who knows what's going to happen later this year, but for goodness sake, Queensland, this bloke, this government, get rid of them. I don't care what you put in their place, well, obviously, apart from the Greens, but get rid of them. I got a lot more, but I want to get to a debate. So let's get to that in a moment or two's time. Stephen Conroy is here, along with the wonderful James Morrow. We will get them both on the telly straight away. I'm telling you, I could have gone and gone and gone and gone. But I want to be respectful to our guests and respectful to you as well. There's only so much of aggro you can put up at any one time. So let's get into it straight after the break. Nigel Farage here as well. Got a lot on our mind and plenty to fire up about. I'm glad you're here all hour long. Stephen Conroy, James Morrow, 30 seconds though. I just want to show you about how the lefty media hunt as a pack. Simon Kennedy is a bloke who is the new Liberal Party candidate for the seat of Cook. Now, I'll be honest, I don't know him particularly well. I was taught by his mum at Epping Boys High School way back when, 30-something years ago. So if that's enough for a Media Watch conspiracy, there you go, you got it. In the meantime, seems like a decent bloke, and he's, of course, going to, well, presumably sail into the Parliament because the Liberal vote's pretty good down there. In fact, here's part of what he's had to say after becoming the Liberal candidate.
In this electorate, it's beautiful, and I think the people of Cook expect it. Yeah. The people of Cook expect it, and that's what we'll be doing. And who wouldn't want to move to a place like this? It's stunning.
But isn't it amazing? Remember how often I talk about narrative versus news? And this, of course, is just amazing that all the lefty media decided to file the one headline at the same time to try to pigeonhole this bloke as some sort of a guy who doesn't understand working people, or yet another example of the Liberal Party choosing the wrong person. Here's the headline from the Sydney Morning Herald. Former McKinsey consultant. The Australian Broadcasting Corporations. Liberal choose former McKinsey consultant. The Guardian, management consultant. All of that, of course, is just about trying to send a signal that this is the wrong type of person to select for the Parliament. Albo, of course, also decided to sow this little bit of, well, let's not say misinformation, but just Alboism before the candidate was chosen.
I noticed the Liberal Party have the opportunity to finally select a woman candidate today for Cook, but we'll wait and see whether they actually do, or whether it's yet another bloke sitting behind Peter Dutton just saying no to everything.
Oh, so they picked the wrong person, and it's the guy from McKinsey's, the management consultancy. Therefore, it's more of the same. Stale, pale male. Cue the Teals, who say they would like to run in the seat of Cook. You automatically say, but hang on, the Liberal vote's so high, they'd have no chance. Simon Holmes à Court, their funder, with Climate 200, says, hardly a day goes by without someone sliding into my DMs saying, why haven't you got somebody for Cook yet? He turns around and says, it doesn't work like that. There has to be a community uprising of people who want to apply. But of course, the only reason that they would be able to get a Teal to be competitive would be if the Labor Party runs in the seat. And you see the Prime Minister is dangling the idea of whether Labor runs in the seat or not. Play this grab.
Well, we haven't made a final decision on that. Cook is not a seat that it would be expected that we would win.
And that's because at the last election, the Labor Party got 24% of the vote and Scott Morrison got 54% of the vote. But you see, for the Teal to become competitive, Labor has to run. Because if Labor runs, then they have more non-Liberal options on the ballot, their preferences all concertina together, and you end up as a Teal MP. Don't believe me? Have a look at these seats that are now Teal seats and the Labor vote in all of them in the 2022 election. In North Sydney, it was 21%. In Curtin in Western Australia, it was 13%. In Goldstein, it was 11%. In Wentworth, it was 11%. In Warringah, the Labor Party vote was 8%. McKellar's vote was 8%. Kooyong's was 6%. So you see, the game is if you can get the Liberal Party to go under 50% on the primary vote, then everyone else on the ballot preferences against them, including Labor, Green, Teal, you get a Teal MP. I don't want it to happen, but that's how they plan for it to happen. All right, James Morrow and Stephen Conroy, no doubt we can question my analysis if we wish, but still just a little tip as to how it works, all right? I'm showing you how the sausage is made, and it ain't pretty. But let's talk about these people that are part of the Doomsday Cult Extinction Rebellion. And when you're part of a Doomsday Cult, you believe that anything you do is worth it because it's in service of the cause. And they shut traffic down in Melbourne today, James. Yet the response is, we don't know right now.
Well, I'll tell you something, Paul. It's funny that in a country that prides itself on being so irreligious and secular as Australia, that this religious cult here is allowed to go and block traffic. I was thinking, if it had time, I would have gotten the producers to bring out a little clip that we sometimes run on Outsiders of how the Victorian police used to deal with people who were involved with vaccine and lockdown protests. And they were a little bit more, shall we say, kinetic than they were with these guys. Would you like to come down off your truck? Not yet. Maybe later. Can we bring some tea? Would you like us to hoist you up some tea?
Yeah. Are you in your pyjamas posting on Facebook? Click, click.
Yeah.
Are you holding up the Westgate?
Well, it's all right. Yeah. Not the pregnant lady in the pajamas who's going to get dragged off for liking the wrong thing on Facebook. But it shows also, how utterly politicized the Victorian police force is, and the way they treat people differently for the similar sorts of things. In fact, this is arguably worse. But just because of the politics and the narrative around it.
Correct. Stephen, if it was a bunch of people that were anti-abortion, what would the reaction have been of the state authority? But the thing is, there are people like yourself, right, red to your bootstraps, who can't stand this stuff, because this is stuff that we always used to see in other countries, and we'd roll our eyes about how ridiculous it is, because whether you vote Victorian Socialist or whether you vote One Nation, you've got a right to get in your car, go where you need to go, and the only thing that stops you is a red light or a traffic jam.
Well, look, firstly, just to add my voice to the condemnation to the idiots involved, I actually drive across the Westgate Bridge quite regularly to get to work. I didn't this morning, to my good fortune, but look, this caused miles-long traffic jams. It was an outrageous act. They could have made their protest simply by parking on the side of the road with their flag, with their banners, whatever, and wave to everybody sitting on the roof as they went by, honking their horns, whatever else they want to do. Completely legitimate form of protest. This is not. Just like they did in Brisbane, just like they did on, I think, the Sydney Harbour Bridge, where they risked lives. Again, you get the situation here where you can't really... This is not a Tom Cruise Mission Impossible movie where people jump on top of trains and have fights and no one actually falls off the train despite how fast it's moving.
Yeah.
But even on a stationary truck, there are dangers involved. And imagine if either an officer or one of the idiots fell down in a struggle getting them down off the roof. It is one of those difficult situations that police are faced with, like when people sit on top of roofs, whether they're protesting, and there was recently a protest in Melbourne.
Like that.
Yeah, absolutely. They set out. They know the pressure points. I mean, the good pressure points of the police won't take the risk of anyone getting injured because it's worse than the discomfort of 25-mile queues, and that is just unfortunate. But they're morons. They should be prosecuted, and they should learn that if they want legitimate protests where they can gain support, side of the road, honking horns, waving banners. Those are legitimate forms of protest. This is not.
Yeah, let's talk about Bowen's big car ban. And as Tim Blair pointed out, as the evidence is there, this whole we've got to do it because America does it, there's a giant asterisk in all of that. And many of the vehicles that would end up getting pushed off the road here in Australia are exempt from the rules in the United States. James, I know you've been following this for some time as well. At what point will the government see sense here where even on the bigger issue, we're 1% of the world's problem, right? 1%. China's 30%. So this is not going to make any significant change to 1%. So let people drive what they want to drive in a country as big as ours.
Well, and there's so many lies that are coming out of this here. I mean, I love this whole thing they say where, we're a dumping ground for all the cars the rest of the world doesn't want. All those, European car manufacturers with all those right-hand drive cars that are just sitting there that they can't sell anywhere else.
American pickups.
Yeah. I mean, come on.
I wish.
Well, American pickups, which you can't sell over here because the steering wheel's on the wrong side.
I wish.
This is the point, So this is a complete lie that they're telling about this stuff. It's a lie that it's not going to cost you more for these cars because, of course, it will. They want to restrict choice or guide your choice. But the really interesting thing, there was a fascinating piece in The Australian yesterday, interview with the CEO of a new car company in England who was saying a lot of these electric vehicles, they're as bad as sort of fast fashion, you know? The battery lasts for a certain number of years, and then the car is worn out, it's done, and it's worthless. And this is not about saving the planet. This is about either green subsidies and rent seeking, or it's about driving people out of private vehicles. And you know there's a lot of people on the left who hate the idea that you can get in your car and go wherever you want, whenever you want to.
It's why, in part, Stephen, I got so passionate at the start of the show, right, which is about, and like yourself, right, good suburban fella, right, as everyone is watching us, right, is that cars equal autonomy, autonomy equals freedom, right? So you have to go and fill it up, right? So when the government says, "Oh, we're doing everything we possibly can on cost of living," you'd think they'd do something about the 50 cents a litre tax that they take, but that's another argument. But they don't understand that when they're playing with cars, and in this case the fuel standards for cars, it by extension is really fiddling around on the edges of what I was mentioning about that freedom and autonomy. If I want to buy a ute, I'm buying a ute because I plan to use it, not because it looks good on Instagram.
Well, look, I mean, you make some really good points, Paul, but then I think you sort of run down a bit of a rabbit hole there. I absolutely agree with you.
Brother. He's going to pull me back in the line here. He's going to go, "I get your son, but..."
People want that autonomy and that freedom. And that's why, you know, those, and I don't believe there's many in the Labor Party. I mean, you might want to point to the Greens, and I'd say that might be a fair criticism, who are trying to eradicate cars on the basis of freedom.
The ones you preference.
Okay. But it's a heckle night from Paul. This would be like in the pub again last week.
It used to be, that was fun. That was fun. I love that. And he stuck around, by the way. He didn't, after the show last week, just go, "Oh, this isn't my room, I'm out." He stuck around and had plenty of selfies with them as well. Anyway, so do you think Bowen's in the right place on the cars, or what's your free advice for how he gets to the right place?
I think we've got to be careful how we implement the plan, but I think the majority of Australians are behind the renewable push. I've made this point consistently. Now, if we were to go too fast and cars weren't available, then obviously, by definition, it would become, you know, shortages, create price rises. But no one is suggesting that the timing of this is going to cause some sort of mass car shortage, except perhaps some self-interested car makers. Here's a hint. Don't always believe everything the car makers tell you on this issue.
And the same for the EV Council?
Take as gospel.
I mean, sorry, but there are so many rent seekers. There are so many rent seekers on the green side here. Our friends at the EV Council who are just hoovering up money from all these different car manufacturers. But they're virtuous. They're okay. But the point is, though, that by design, and you can never get them to admit it, and I've talked to Chris Bowen's people about it, they will never admit that the point is to restrict choice and make some vehicles over here more expensive so that you buy them over there.
I'll give you a second, James.
Fiddling with the market.
There's a reason they won't... So I'll give you a hint about why they won't admit it. Because it's not true. Because it's not true. Like, this is a fantasy of yours. No one's saying you don't get a car to have free choice.
That's not what I'm saying. They're saying it's going to cost more. Oh, market signals.
They're giving market signals. Market signals over a period of time creates change. All right. That's just economics 101, James.
Yes, so market signal means it's going to cost more. Okay,
all right, lads. I have talked too much tonight, so I apologise. I owe you all a collective something. But I want to ask one quick one before we go, 30 seconds each. And can we show Stephen here, because I know how much he's going to love the mention of the Sam Kerr incident. Because he is, of course, like me, a big fan of the Matildas, understands her power, understands that she's probably like top 5, maybe top 3 of sporting celebrities in the country. The problem is, of course, there's this legal matter that's going to play play out in the UK. Clearly, she didn't tell Football Federation back here in Australia because it has potentially sort of part of this racial discrimination elements to it. There's a lot on top of all of this. Now, previously, when people have been charged or end up in a legal situation, say in rugby league, then they're out until it's resolved. Stephen, I hate to ask you first, but even though Sam's got an injury right now, should the convention be, OK, you're out, innocent until proven guilty, on full pay and full love, but you don't pull on the jersey until this is resolved?
Look, I'm not sure of all the details here. I've been trying to follow this.
Yeah,
the details are a little bit scant. A bit more has come out during the day. But firstly, with Australian law, we do tend to move a little bit quicker. So firstly, if you were to apply the principle here that she's out until it's held. I mean, Julia Assange is still waiting for trial 12 years later. Maybe Sam's heading for the Ecuador embassy as we speak. But I think the idea that she steps down until it's heard, like, oh my God, that could be forever in the UK system.
Yeah.
That's the first one. That's not to make light of the seriousness of what is alleged to have happened. And I haven't.
But that's what's been hard all day. We've all been looking for that. What did she say? What did she say? Because then we can decide whether it's right at the edge or not. Give me less than 30 seconds, James, because I want to be fair.
Sam Kerr has to have the presumption of innocence here. I think it is ridiculous that this is being set down for a 4-day trial. Apparently, she is alleged to have maybe said something nasty and mean, which we don't condone. But, this is England, and this is what they're worrying about. Maybe if she had a Palestine flag, they would have said, oh, that's all right. Fair cop. I don't know.
Yeah, correct. All right. Get Matilda's for Palestine. That'll be the next one. All right. Thank you, guys. Do appreciate it. We'll see you all again next week. I'll get in trouble for that, but I don't care. I'm in one of those fun ones tonight. Nigel Farage joins us straight after the break. Plenty to talk about, including Trump's massive win in court today, which means Nikki Haley. Bye-bye. I'm so excited to talk to our next guest, of course, none other than the wonderful Nigel Farage, and I can't wait because there's so much around the world. Let's start with our mate Trump. So, 9-0 Supreme Court says you can't do this garbage where you'll keep his name off the ballot. His name goes on the ballot. And by extension, after Super Tuesday tomorrow, which is Wednesday, our collective time, he'll blow away Nikki Haley, which means she was sticking around hoping the Supreme Court would find a way, but it ain't going to be anything other than them defeating him one-on-one in the ballot box.
Yeah, and she's utterly disloyal as well. I mean, she said if Trump wins, which he's going to win the nomination, she might not even vote Republican. She might not even vote for him. So quite what game she's playing, I don't know. As you know, Paul, I was with him last Monday at Mar-a-Lago. Despite everything they're throwing at him, he is doing very, very well. And I've just got this feeling, particularly with this new campaign, Blacks for Trump, which is really gaining momentum, that his leads now in the swing states are around about 5% on average over Biden. He is in a really, really good place. And tonight, it's more like a coronation because some of the states that are voting are showing his share of the vote against Haley's as high as 85%.
Ooh, that's it. Look, if it was ever in doubt, and it's never been in doubt, it is completely done by this time tomorrow. Now, let's talk about a bloke called George Galloway. For those that are watching right now, he was formerly of the Labor Party. He's sort of been in and out of their side of politics. He's got more left-wingers he's gone. He's had a pretty strong online presence for a while. He decided to run in a by-election. He's in, and the first words out of his mouth were, "This is for Gaza."
Yes, this is for Gaza. He appeared in the House of Commons. He was sworn in. I've been warning ever since the 7th of October that if we weren't careful, religious sectarian politics would come to England. We saw it for decades in Northern Ireland with that Protestant-Catholic split. Now it's coming to England. So Galloway gets elected on a Muslim vote. Be in no doubt about it, it was Muslims that voted Galloway overwhelmingly. He appears in the House of Commons. Everyone's in denial. No, Nigel, you're wrong. This is not sectarian politics. And then Galloway stands outside the historic St Stephen's entrance to the Palace of Westminster and says the next election will be all about Muslims. And some of the things that his supporters, even his deputy leader said the night of the Galloway victory, there are more kids being killed in Gaza than died in Auschwitz. I mean, it's one of the most disgusting comments I've ever heard on British television, and it was live on GB News. We couldn't stop the transmission. This is a vehemently Israel-hating, anti-Semitic movement. And Galloway, what he will do is he'll peel votes away from the Labour Party. The Labour Party had the Muslim vote as a bloc vote. They're about to lose it. And the implications for our democracy are very, very serious indeed.
Well, and this is playing out with Biden as well, right? Where there's a significant Muslim population in certain states that he needs to be able to potentially win the presidency again, but we'll all wait and see. But I think that is part of how we're seeing the American government. And I believe, after looking at what we've seen, say, with the State Department talking about it, the Australian and the UK government, that I think that Biden will end up formally recognising Palestine before the election as a way of trying to reach out to a certain section of voters. And this is frankly as a result of the policies that our countries have had for 20 years of, hey, everyone, whatever, and then it ends up that we end up importing a certain type of politics, don't we?
We do, and I mean, of course, we've all been told all diversity is good. Diversity is brilliant. Well, diversity is fine, but you have to have something in common. You have to share something culturally, whether it's a love of cricket or whatever it is. You have to have things that bind you together. And what we've found in this country, and we're seeing in parts of America, is that there are, and not all, of course, by any means, but large sections of the Muslim population who all live together, who in many cases never learn English, with whom we have virtually no shared history or culture whatsoever, and whose leaders now want to impose their way of life on us. They want us to adopt Sharia law, to live under a completely different code. And that's the point. Generally, people go to Australia or America from all over the world, and they want to become Australian. They want to become American. But there is an element of this religion that wants to impose themselves upon us. And that is why, immigration policies into countries have to be thought about very, very carefully indeed.
Yeah, now look, we live under a similar regulatory environment that you do, so forgive me here, but of course, you're not saying, and I'm not saying about individuals and all the rest of it, right? But what we are talking about here is the reality that when you end up pocketing any type of people, right, that like always hires like, and like votes for like, and like demands like, right? And that is going to become increasingly quite an issue in all of our countries. It really will. But I noticed, by the way, as well, I know you wanted to mention something about Biden, but can we just quickly talk about some nonsense happening in your country, if you don't mind me asking, right? Which is the media regulator is trying to go after you. Right? Is it those rules about political figures and whether they can or can't be on television? Sorry, are you running? Did you announce at some point in time? But why is the media regulator trying to knock you off?
I've just done my 550th episode of Farage on GB News. I know that I'm a mere boy, Paul, compared to you, I'm a mere boy. But I've done 550 shows for 2.5 years. Do you know, I've not had one single complaint upheld against me, whether it's on due impartiality or whatever it is. I was a politician, I am an issues campaigner and a broadcaster, and even I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. When I was in my jungle, put up on the screen, Nigel Farage, ex-politician.
Yep.
But suddenly, they've decided there has to be an inquiry. I wonder whether the fact we have a general election bearing down upon us, the fact that my show every night now beats the BBC, beats Sky, I wonder whether somebody in authority has suggested to the board members of Ofcom, get him off air or you might not get your knighthoods. I mean, what a thing for me to say.
But how could you cut his mic? Cut his mic! This is unacceptable. Thank you, Nigel. A full version of what he's just saying is great. It's on YouTube. I'll put it up on our socials. Thank you, mate. Talk to you soon. Nigel Farage there, not hard out because of what he said, but because we want you to support the people who support us. All right, we're done for the night. Megyn Kelly will be joining us tomorrow evening. We'll stay fired up and focused, and here comes the late debate. Ta-da.